I made this video because I went on YouTube looking for some tarp designs, tarp shelters. And I saw a few good ones, but I didn't see any that was as good as this. So I figured I'd show you this tarp shelter. This is made with a moss parawing that's 8.5 feet by 8.5 feet. It took me about a minute and a half to set up, literally. And it's fully enclosed on all sides, except this opening, which can be closed very easily. It's hung from the center of the tarp and suspended with a footprint that is an equilateral triangle. And is 8.5 feet long. That's a pretty long shelter. And if it's 8.5 feet long, you can see it's about 4 feet tall. You can sit up and kneel in it. 2 people can sit in it quite comfortably. Staked out on 3 sides, plus in the center, about in the center there, to hold it down to keep the doorway open. There's plenty of room for 1, some room for 2, but lots of room for lots and lots of gear. And this is a setup I use if I think it might rain, but I don't think, but I'm not expecting it. So in case it rains, I can close that flap, I can turn my bivy sack around, and I'm fully enclosed for the night. And there's about a half a dozen shelters you can make that are based off this basic design. And all of them are suspended at the center of the tarp and held out on 3 sides in an equilateral triangle. Okay, this is what the shelter looks like when the weather is really nasty. It's a totally enclosed 8.5 foot equilateral triangle for a footprint. You can see underneath it a little bit, but when it rains you can tie it down on the sides. And in the snow, it's generally under the snowpack, so nothing gets in. And the equilateral triangle is made by using 3 sides and doubling up the 4th in one corner right there, leaving a flap. When you're expecting bad weather, you can tie the center down. You've got a totally enclosed space. And you get in by opening that flap and going in the little slot that's made right there. And I'll show you a couple of variations of this basic design. All of them begin this way. I start with an equilateral triangle tied from the center of the tarp. And it's basically huge for an 8.5 foot tarp. It even works pretty good for ponchos. It's not quite an equilateral triangle when you do it, but you get the most bang for the buck that way. Here's the same shelter. This time I took the 2 extra sides and I just rolled them up and tied them off with a tie from the inside of the tent. And this is great if you know there's going to be no rain and you want to sleep under the stars with a little bit of protection. Also works great as a sunshade. No wind block. And you're all familiar with the half pyramid shelter. This is basically the half pyramid, only half of that pyramid is rolled up and tied at the top. This is another cool variation. This gives you plenty of room for 2 people with lots of protection against most rain. 2 people can set up, stay dry just fine. Lots of headroom for both. All I did was I took the extra material, joined it at a point that varies depending on how much protection I want, and then tied what was left down to the bottom. And the great thing about this is there's no way rain can get in. And even if it hits any point, it's going to go down and out. And this makes a cool little rain gutter if rain happens to get in. Pours right down and out of your tent. Just have to be careful where it goes. But that is a pretty neat setup for tarping. Like I said, they all begin the same way, so if the weather changes, if your mood changes, you got a different way to set up after you've set most of your stakes and after you've set your tension point at the top. As I was taking the tarp down, I figured I'd show you one more thing. That's the footprint of the tarp, no matter how you set it up. I have that corner tied down, that corner tied down, and then two adjacent corners tied down there, leaving these two sides and all this extra room, all this extra material. And in the middle of that is that circle, and from that circle this thing is going to be suspended. And from that suspended pyramid you can make all those shapes that you just saw.